who am I? I'm a PhD student at the Astronomical Observatory, as I said already, and we are actually a bunch of foreign PhD students at Jagiellonian University in Krakow, and we work in different fields of physics like cosmology, the sun, let's say the galaxies, the radio galaxies, and X-rays, binaries, and everything. And our main motive is to explain our topic or some part of our topic in a very, let's say, like sort of a layman language, so that we can express it in more basic language. So my idea of today's talk would be to understand the few concepts behind Einstein's special relativity. Just start the timer, so I have to begin at 4:07. Okay, so in this talk, what you will learn is first the light which we see and the light which we observe, is it actually a wave or a particle? And that is very intrinsically linked to Maxwell's equations, which govern how your light flows or flows in a medium, which is known as the theory known as electrodynamics. And then the idea would be to understand how it is linked to relativity and the unification of space and time. And in the meanwhile, can somebody comment that, are you seeing my cursor, like the pointer thing and all that? And by the time you guys comment, I will see whether, yeah. So the basic notion would be that this space and time, so the space is like your three-dimensional coordinate, the x, y, z, and time were basically separate. So these were thought to be separate before Einstein came into the picture, and there were these sort of like pretty amazing mathematicians and physicists who were working on this concept that how space and physics, how space and time are separate. And then the idea would be that how Einstein came into the picture and he sort of brought this space and time together. Okay, so let's begin. First of all, I'll just try to explain the physics which was sort of prevalent at that time before Einstein came into the picture. So first of all, we have to look into something which is called the Young's double slit experiment. So this is Thomas Young, and his idea was that light is actually a wave and is subject to something which is called the superposition. And his greatest achievement was to demonstrate the constructive and the destructive interference of light. So imagine that you have this like boundary over here, and there are these two very small slits. So if you will pass light through it, what happens is that at some regions, let's say in this region over here. So in these regions, the light wave will stack on, the light wave will not stack on top of each other, and they will form something which is called as destructive interference. So this destructive interference would be something, would form which is something called a dark fringe. And also one more thing can happen, that there is something that when the waves, they lie on top of each other, they will form something which is called the constructive interference, and that will form a bright fringe. So essentially what is happening is that light is coming out of these two slits, and it is forming this constructive and destructive interference, and it is forming these fringes. And this is a very characteristic property of light being a wave. So the idea portrayed by Young over here is that, okay, the light is actually a form of a wave. Then now you might want to imagine that, okay, how it is a wave. Then we can easily imagine, like, suppose you have these two balls and you are sort of doing this up down motion in the river or a lake. So you might have seen these waves being formed, right? So one wave is formed by this, one wave is formed by this, and if you look closely, you will see that there are these destructive interference and constructive interference formed. So these fringe patterns are formed. So now if the question is that, okay, if light is a wave, then the question comes that what is the medium? So if light is a wave, what will be the medium? So this was the thought of the physicists at that time, that okay, light is a wave, you can demonstrate it like this or like this. But what is the idea of the medium? How does light propagate, or where does light propagate, to be precise? But we know that when we look at the when we look at the night sky, which is obviously not empty, you see that starlight is coming to you, right? You see the stars, you can see the sun and everything. So light travels through the outer space, outer space, and we all see something which is called starlight. But the question is that the outer space is actually empty. So how is light traveling? So then at that time physicists were trying to answer this question that okay, how is light traveling such long distances without any medium? So the scientists, they actually sort of formulated that okay, there is light may be traveling through something which is called over here, which is called luminiferous ether. So it was hypothesized that they were trying to think about it, that the earth and everything, it moves through a medium of ether that carries the light. So you can imagine that earth and all the planets are there, and they are moving through this medium called ether, and light travels through this ether and reaches the earth. So this was the basic picture, that okay, you have the sun, sorry, the point is here, you have the sun, you have the earth, and they are rotating around each other or whatever, and there is this luminiferous ether which is all around, and light is propagating through this ether. So that time physicists were like, okay, there is this ether, and light should propagate through it. Well, okay, if you are hypothesizing something, if you are like saying that okay, light travels through a medium, you have to prove what that medium is. So you have to perform some experiments, because physics in one word is like you can come up with many theories, but you need some experimental proof for that theory to be right. So here right now the picture is that scientists are all saying that okay, there is ether all around, and the sun and the planets are moving around this ether, so somebody has to test it. So in 1887, Michelson and Morley, these two guys, they came up with an experiment to test the existence of ether. So their idea was very simple. They said that the background of whatever the sun and the earth and everything are, that is in ether, and that is static, that is not moving. It's the sun and the earth which are moving around the ether, right? So the sun and the earth, they are moving. So their idea, which was actually a very brilliant idea at that time, was that ether, this hypothesized medium, would affect the speed of the waves or the particles. So if light is traveling from this sun to this earth within this medium ether, its speed would be different. So this is the sort of an let's say an idea of to look into it. So they demonstrated this experiment. So what they did, what they thought originally was that if light wave is traveling in the same direction as the earth rotation, so you can imagine that earth is rotating like this, and the speed of and the light is flowing in that direction, then it would mean that the speed of light is higher in the direction of the earth's rotation, right? And how to imagine this as an example? So assume that you are in a boat, and the boat has some velocity, it has some engines, and this is the velocity of the boat. So this direction is the velocity of the boat, and this direction is the velocity of the river. So can you write in the comment section like what would be the total velocity of the boat? So you have a boat which is moving in this direction with some velocity, and you have a river which is flowing in the same direction. So can you just write in the comment section what would be the total velocity of the boat? It would be some form of addition. So the boat is in one direction and the river is also in one direction. So could you just say like, or guess what would be the velocity of the boat as seen by you who are outside in the shore or something? Just waiting for the comments. So you have the velocity of the boat and the velocity of the river. So there would be a total velocity of the boat. Waiting for comments. Yeah. Okay, so since I think I'm not getting any comments right now, so well, the answer would be simple that the total velocity would be the velocity of the boat plus the velocity of the river, right? So the total velocity of this boat would be the velocity of the boat itself plus the velocity of the river. So the Michelson-Morley experiment was that, okay, you can imagine this boat as light which is traveling, and this ether is the river. So the velocity of the boat or the light would be the velocity of the light plus the velocity in the medium in which it is traveling. So the velocity of the boat, which is the light which is traveling on the river, which is the ether over here. So they were trying. So their idea was that maybe we will get some increase in the velocity of light in one direction and not in the other direction, because if the velocity of the boat is in this direction and if the river flows in the other direction, then the velocity would be less. So that is the idea over here. So let's look at their experiment. So what they did is that they shot a laser in this direction, and what happened is that part of it went in this direction over here, perpendicular, and part went in the straight direction. Now, for a moment, imagine that there is no ether and everything. Oh, and I see that you were seeing my GIF already, but there is a presentation thing. But anyways, so the light which goes over here and comes back, and the light which goes over here and comes back, it will take the same amount of time because there is no ether, right? So it goes here and come back, it goes here and come back, and then it will try to form those interference and the interference and the interference patterns over here. So this was the basic idea. So the results they were expecting was that, I will just try to click this and see whether I can get this link over here, but I cannot. Yeah, actually I think I have shared the screen, but sorry about that, because I have clicked this link and it has opened in another window which is sort of not shared. So let me try to do that, because there is this experiment which I wanted to show. So is there another screen which is being shared? Not this, not this. Okay, so there has been some error on my part, because I think right now you won't be able to see anything because everything has sort of gone away. But let me just do one thing. Sorry about this interruption, guys, because I'm trying to share, but it's showing everything black. Anyways. Swap red and blue. Okay, so let's get back to this image only. So I will just go ahead and not show this link over here. So the idea was that if there is no ether, the light would take the same amount of time in this direction and in this direction. So there would be no fringe patterns formed, like which we saw earlier. And now if there is ether, so you have to imagine that there is some medium of there is some medium which is over here. Then what will happen, that the speed of light in one direction would be different to the speed of light in the other direction, right? And that would mean that the light is out of phase, and that would form some fringe pattern. By fringe pattern, what I mean is over here. Okay, I cannot control the slide also now. Bit embarrassing, but Okay. Okay, can you see the screen if anybody can? Can anybody write in the comment section what they are seeing right now, because I think I have made an error. Because I'm sharing the screen, but I don't know whether I'm sharing it in OBS or not. Okay, I'll try to go it again. I present. Since I cannot read your comments right now, so I don't know what you are seeing actually. Okay, somebody wrote the velocity of that thing, but okay, so I got the confirmation that you are seeing the boat slide. Yeah, so the basic idea was that light, if ether is present, then light would take different amount of times to go in this direction and in this direction and reach over here. So they were expecting some form of interference, like interference pattern like these things. So just to explain again, that if light is like in this form, then it will form a destructive interference, which means that the amplitude would be 0. And if it is forming a constructive interference, then you would form something like this. And the idea was that if ether is present, they would see something. They would see some fringe patterns like this, but they actually did not see nothing. So it would mean that there was no interference pattern observed. And so I will explain it over here also. So you can see that there is light which is going in this direction, and when it will come back from this direction and from the above direction, it is taking some amount of time, right? Now if ether is present over there, then it would take different amount of time. And the idea was that you would see some interference pattern over here. But to the greatest surprise, there was actually no interference pattern observed. So this Michelson-Morley experiment is also called as the most famous failed experiment, because it sort of gave nothing. And the only conclusion that could be taken out was that speed of light is same in all the direction. And there was another problem which was happening, is that suppose you are imagining, this is you are standing over here and you are seeing this light. You are trying to see the velocity of this cork or the velocity of the bullet. So since you are standing still, you will observe that, okay, this is just the velocity of the cork and the velocity of the bullet. But if somebody else is running in this direction, he or she will observe that the velocity of the cork and the bullet is different, because he would or she would have to add or subtract his or her own velocity. But for light, this was not happening. So an observer which is stationary and an observer which is running with some velocity v, they both will observe the velocity of light as c. So this was also a problem which was happening. Now, in the meantime, when people were trying to prove the existence of ether and Michelson-Morley experiment was done and they could not find out anything, in 1873 there was James Clerk Maxwell, who found out the theory of electromagnetic radiation. So theory of electromagnetic radiation is basically you bring electricity and magnetism together. So that is called your electromagnetic radiation. And what he determined was that he found out that the light is an electromagnetic wave and it always travels. So you can imagine that the electric field travels like this and the magnetic field is perpendicular, and this is how a light wave propagates. So this is how the light from sun is coming to us on earth. And he determined that the speed of light is 1,80,000 miles per second. So this was very firmly established. But now if you want to if you want to pose the question that what if you run at the speed of light and observe light. So you can imagine that you shoot light in some direction and you are running with it. So how you will see light then? Obviously this is a thought which this cat is thinking, and this was actually the thought of a 16-year-old who was Einstein. So his idea was that if Einstein is running along with the speed of light, along with a photon or along with light, then how he will observe this light, because since he is moving and the light is moving, he should observe the light as still. But this would actually violate the Maxwell's law of electromagnetism, because these were very strict, because electromagnetic waves move at the speed of light and they cannot stay still. So there has to be some form of let's say a way out you have to think about in these terms. So now we come up to the physics which is after Einstein. So in 1905, Einstein came up with his special theory of relativity, in which he said that the first postulate is that the laws of physics are same in all the initial observers. Bunch of tricky words, but let's try to see what these laws of physics and why they are same in the inertial frame. So let us observe some birds. So imagine that you are at rest, smiling over here, and I am running in some direction. You are also observing the birds and I am also observing the birds, and we try to figure out the velocity of these birds. Obviously, you will observe a velocity, some v or something, and I will observe a different velocity because I am myself running with some velocity. But if we want to observe the change in the velocity, we will see that they will be the same. And if the velocity is, if the change of velocity is same, this means that the force which these birds are generating is sort of the same. Now, what I mean by all of this is that this force is related to the change in velocity. This is actually the Newton's first law of motion. So this law of physics, this basic law that force is proportional to the change in velocity, this actually remains same for you at rest and for me who is running. So first postulate is that the laws of physics are all same for all the inertial observers. And then the second postulate which Einstein came up with, and just to mention, he was not a student at that time, he was living life as a patent clerk. So the second postulate, which was sort of groundbreaking, is that the speed of light in vacuum is same for all the inertial observers. So if you are standing still and if I am running with any velocity or something, the speed of light will always be c. We denote the speed of light as c, which is approximately 1,80,000 miles per second. So this was the idea that if I am still and if you are running, and if I light a light bulb, then the light which is coming out from it would travel at the speed c. And you can also imagine that if you are the flash and if a cameraman is running with you, then both will observe the light as c over here. So this was the basic, like the physics changing postulate, that the speed of light would be the same for all the inertial observers. So hence the basic idea was that the young Einstein, who was trying to run along the speed of who was trying to run along the light, would never observe a stationary light. And the only way to, and this was the only way to reconcile the principles of relativity and Maxwell's equation. So this is the principle of relativity, and here is the second postulate which Einstein came up with. And with these two, you could sort of reconcile the relativity part and the Maxwell's equation part. But now if we are saying that, okay, speed of light is same in all the frame, what is the big deal? But now we have to be more careful and think about the consequences of what would happen. What would happen in such a case? Just seeing if there is any comments. Not much, but anyways. So till now, what has been happening, I'll just recap quickly. Before Einstein, people were thinking that speed of light is something in one direction and something in the other direction. But when Michelson and Morley did this experiment, they found out that the speed of light is same in all the direction. That was a big shock. And the brave step which was taken by Einstein was his second postulate. He said that the speed of light is same in all the direction. No matter if you are flash and if you are running very fast and if you see light, and if I am standing still and if I see light, then the speed of light would always be the same. So now let us keep that in mind and just try to understand this example. So let's say if I am at rest over here and if I shine a torch, like basic torch, then I would measure the speed of light as 1,80,000 miles per second. Now, suppose that you are in a train and you are running in the other direction. So, you are moving in a train whose speed is like, let's say, 2,000 miles per second. So, if we go according to the previous logic, like the example of the boat which I was telling you, then you would measure the speed of light to be the speed of light minus this 2000 thing. So, you would measure 1,78,000 miles per second. But we know that this is not possible because this would break the because we know that the speed of light would be speed of light is same in all the frames, the frame at rest and the frame at motion. And because if the speed of light is different, then the Maxwell's equation would look different in this frame and in this frame, and that would postulate that would contradict the postulate 1. So once Einstein said that okay, the speed of light is constant for all the frames, what else would change? So that is the basic question which we are trying to look. And the only way out, which Einstein thought, was that time is relative. So to recap, before Einstein, what was the idea? That time is absolute. So if I'm giving a presentation over here and I note the time as, I don't know, 4:33, you are in some other time zone and you all note some time or whatever. But that time, the concept of time is absolute. But this happens for me and you because we are moving very slow. But if either of us move very close to the speed of light, then something happens. So that the only way to come out is to come up with this idea that time is relative. And what does this actually mean? We'll try to understand with this picture. So imagine that there is this guy who is standing still, and there is this guy who is moving with some velocity, right? And if they both observe light, now the basic postulate of Einstein is that the speed of light would be the same. This could only happen for this guy who is moving. So the time for person on the train must run differently compared to the time for the person at rest. So the time which this guy is experiencing, this guy at rest, is actually different for the time which this guy who is moving is experiencing. And why is this so? So that the speed of light could be constant in all the frames. By frame I mean the frame at rest and the frame, I mean this moving frame. Now, if you want to look at the consequences, and if you might want to ask that, okay, does this mean that observers in different motion, they experience time differently? Well, actually, yes. And if you want to say that, okay, time is relative and it varies in different frame of references, so that is also yes. And this was the breakthrough in physics, that Einstein came up with the idea that there is no absolute time and there is actually no ether. And now let us look at some consequences of special relativity. So first of all, we saw that fast moving clocks, so a clock which is on a train, or by clock I mean you are measuring time. So that moving clocks will actually run slower. So that is called time dilation. And the other thing which is a consequence of special relativity is that fast moving objects, they appear shorter. This is something which is called Lorentz contraction. And these two gentlemen, Lorentz and Poincaré, they already had the mathematics with them, but they could not come up with the let's say the main idea that speed of light has to be constant in all the frames. So I mean, that's why Einstein gained all the, let's say, the celebrityness or whatever. But I just wanted to mention that. And another implication of this speed of light being constant and what special relativity does is that fast moving objects, they appear to have increased mass. So this is called the mass and the energy equivalence. So E is equals to mc squared, the famous one which you see, and which had some consequences at like bombing places and all. Now, I won't go into details like how length contraction and E is equals to mc square is happening, but I would just go into like why this length contraction is happening. So, okay, we go back to the speed of light, which I have been blabbering along. So, speed of light is c, right? We denote it by c. It is some distance upon time. So, I can say that this is some ratio, right? This, I can say the distance is 10 and the time is 10. Now, special relativity says that in the frame which is running, or the frame which is moving, time will run slowly. So I am denoted by this arrow that time is running slowly over there. And by time running slowly, I mean that, so if I am at rest, the time according to me is tick, 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 tick. And if you are moving in some frame, and if I observe your clock, then I would see that time is going slow for you. So what I would see you doing, how I would see your time passing would be tick, 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 that thing. You in your frame will not observe the slowing down of time. It is me who will be observing it. So here what I say is that if in the moving frame the time is getting the time is flowing by slowly, then since the speed of light has to be constant, the distance has to also change, right? And if the speed of light has to remain constant, then the only way for these two quantities to make this thing constant is to decrease simultaneously, right? If this is 10 and 10, the ratio is 1. So if time is becoming, let's say 5, then the distance also has to become 5, so the ratio is 1. What I mean is that the speed of light would always be constant. So what it actually means is that time decreasing means that time is slowing down in that frame, and distance decreasing means that the lengths are becoming shorter. So that is called length contraction. So the length of an object will be actually shorter. And now I would go into the concept of how you go from three-dimensional space and time separate to the four-dimensional like space-time, let's say, how it came together. So before special relativity, what was there is that there was the notion of three-dimension space. So you have you can move in the x direction, you can move in the y direction or the z direction, the normal three-dimension world we live in. And time was actually separate. So you did not think time as a dimension then. But after Einstein came up with his relativity, so it was Sir Hermann Minkowski, who was actually a teacher of Einstein. So he had come up with something which was called as the Minkowskian space-time, or which is the four-dimension space-time. So here the idea is that you have to combine the three dimensions of space and time into a four-dimensional space-time. And as I had said previously, that the laws of physics should be the same in all the frames, right? That force is proportional to acceleration should be this law should be same for me who is at rest and for you who is moving. So there is another quantity which sort of remains the same for me who is at rest and for you who is moving, and that is what is called the space-time interval. So the space-time interval between two events is independent of the inertial frame of reference in which they are recorded. So I will tell you what an event is. So the basic idea is that before relativity, space and time were separate, but after relativity, due to the constancy of the speed of light, space-time came to be known together as the space-time diagram, where you represent one of the space-time axis in this direction and the time axis in one direction. And now let's look at a trivial example of a space-time diagram. So on the vertical axis you have the time flowing, and I have multiplied it by c because then the dimensions of these two axes are same. And on the horizontal axis you have the distance. So you can imagine that a firecracker is being burst at this distance at this time, and here is another firecracker which bursts at x2 distance at this time t2. So what are these two things in this space-time? These are called as events. So event is like shining of a light, or you are throwing something or whatever. So those are called events in space-time. And the path of a particle along these events is called a world line. So to be more precise, the points in the space-time diagram over here and over here, they represents a fixed position in space and time, and these are referred to as the events. And if you draw a curve across these events, so the history of an object's location throughout all time, it traces out a line like this, and this is what is called a world line. So right now you are sitting behind your screen, I am over here, we are not moving in time. So the idea is that, okay, what would be the R space-time diagram look like? It would look like something like this. So this is you sitting in a sofa or me sitting here. We are at some constant position x1, but our time is flowing, right? Because time is increasing. And if some of you is, I don't know, moving with a mobile on a car or something, then you would have a world line like this. So this would be your world line. And you want to imagine another space-time diagram. So if you imagine that this is the sun, so obviously sun is still, it is let's assume it is still at the center of our solar system. Obviously, it is still in space, but it is moving in time, right? So that's why this direction. And our Earth, it is rotating around the sun. So this would be the space-time diagram of the Earth around the sun. So this is the sun's world line, and this curved path is the Earth's world line. So these are examples of space-time and how they are sort of brought together. So before ending, I would just like to conclude that before Einstein, what happened was that when these famous physicists were working, that space and time were separate entities, and there people used to think that there was this absolute time, and that the speed of light was thought to be an observer dependent quantity. Here what I mean is that, okay, if I have a laser light, I am at rest, and if I shoot light, I will measure its speed, the speed of light as c. And if you are moving in some direction, opposite or towards me, then you will measure the speed of light as c plus v or c minus v. So this was the idea before Einstein, and people used to think that space and time were sort of separate entities. But after Einstein, what happened was that space and time were brought together in this theory which is known as special theory of relativity. So the basic postulates over here are that space and time were brought on equal footing, because time is now relative, because time is no longer absolute. So time becomes relative, and the speed of light is sort of same in all the frame. So this is how space and time they actually became together, and the diagram in which me and you are living right now is called a space-time diagram. And we have these events like shining of light or something, and the curve which we and you are following in our lifetime or something, that is called the world lines. So right now me and you are sitting still in space but are moving in time. So we have a straight line, world line going sort of in the space-time diagram. And in the end, I would just like to quote like what Minkowski said, and this was like very true. So Minkowski could not came up with special theory of relativity because, I mean, it was Einstein who took on the brave step. But in this 3 lines, you can sort of see that he was also nearing towards that correct thing. So he said then, and I will read it, is that henceforth space by itself and time by itself are doomed to fade away into mere shadows, and only a kind of union of the two will preserve an independent reality. So right now, because me and you, we are not moving at close to speed of light, so we do not observe these effects. But the subatomic particles or the satellites which are moving across the Earth, they actually experience these special relativity effects. So right now, if you switch on your GPS, you will see that your location is very accurate, right? It is only because the satellite which is moving not exactly at speed of light, but it is moving at some high velocity, right? And these satellites, they have to take into the corrections of your special relativity effects. Otherwise, you would be off by 8 to 10 kilometers, and your Uber guy will not deliver to you correctly, I hope. And the basic idea was that this space and time has to be brought together into something which is known as special relativity. And I told you that before Einstein, space and time were separate, but after Einstein came up with his theory, space and time were brought together. And obviously, as I said, theory, but what is the experimental proof? The experimental proof is that Einstein had these thought experiments, but when you observe the motion of these subatomic particles which are moving in the accelerators, they do have this length contraction and time dilation happening. And even this satellite which is moving across the Earth, it has these special relativistic effects. That's why you can use your GPS correctly. And if some of you are noticing that I have been showing a bend over here, so I would leave you with a question that if space-time is like one joint rubber sheet, you can imagine a rubber sheet and you can say that, okay, every point in that rubber sheet is an event, and if I draw 2 axes, one would represent space where I move in space and one represents time. But then the idea is that can this space-time sort of bend? And what this space-time bending is spoiler alert, it is nothing but gravity, and you could check it in our talk, like this was given by me, and there are other talks also. So this was the Einstein and the magic of space-time, where I generally explain that how this space-time bends, and gravity, like how the apple falls to the ground and everything, is nothing but a bending of this space-time. So I will end right now and now wait for your questions. So I will check the comment section and hope the time lag is not much. And sorry for the cuts in between because I was using OBS Studio, but it's tricky to use. So if you have any question, or if I have like spoken too fast, so you can ask like, okay, why was the speed of light constant, or what was happening? Because the basic idea of this talk would be that, okay, the speed of light, why is it so special? The only consequence of light being special is that when things move fast, then you have these concepts of length contraction and time dilation, which you have to sort of bear with, because this is how nature is, or this is how our universe, which me and you live, behaves. So if you have any questions, you can write in the chat box. I'm trying to see, and I will answer right now or later also. Okay, I'm seeing if there is any questions. I'll refresh again because it's not showing me all the questions. Please comment. Okay, Unni told me that there is a question like how to measure the speed of light, and then Arpita said that about twin paradox. So, okay, I'll just go back and see whether I could answer with this experiment over here. Not with this experiment. Yeah, so there are different ways of measuring the speed of light, right? You can, I mean, a simple way would be to, let's say, you can have like two sort of detectors, one detector over here and one detector over here, and you shine the light from this detector to this detector, right? This will this will shoot a light, and it will come here and it will say beep. So it will take some time to reach this detector over here, right? So you can calculate the distance between these detectors and the time it takes to reach from the time it takes from light to reach from here to here. So that would, obviously this is sort of a thought experiment how it gives you, and how people were observing this the speed of light was they were observing the light which it takes from the planets to come here, and they were measuring the eclipses and all that. So people had measured the speed of light pretty accurately. And even in I think here also, if I just take these two mirrors and if I just measure the time it takes from light to go from here to here, and if I know the distance between these two mirrors, I can calculate the time, right? Speed is equals to just distance upon time. And there is a question about time paradox. Okay, so Sandeep Babita had asked like how to measure the speed of light in one direction. This is a very tricky question, because recently I saw I think a video by Vertasium. It's a very great YouTube channel that they were saying that you could only measure the speed of light in both the directions. What I meant to say is that when you had the detector which I was explaining, the light it takes from here to here and then reach back. So one way speed of light thing, I think I'll put the link, because there is actually a different explanation like how you can measure the speed of light in one direction. That's a good question. And then the second one is about twin paradox. I think I will sort of skip it, because the idea of twin paradox is like, so if I am over here in Earth, if I'm still, and let's say if I have a twin brother or sister or something, and he or she takes a spaceship and he flies off to some direction, and his spaceship is traveling very fast. Okay, so now in my frame of reference, I will see my brother or sister going away and then coming back. So I will have some measurement of time and distance according to my clock. So what I will measure is that, because the cousin is not cousin, my brother or sister is going at some distance and coming back, and he's traveling in space time, moving at sea, I will think that he will be younger. But now if you see the situation from the point of view of the brother who is in the spaceship, so since he is in the spaceship, he will see me at Earth moving away, because his spaceship going like, so that is relativity. So he will observe me going in the other direction and coming back, and then he will conclude that I would be younger. So this is the sort of the twin paradox, that which one of them is younger. But the problem is that my brother who went and come back, when he's coming back, his frame of reference has changed. So there is actually no paradox. It would only be that yeah, wait a second. Yeah, so it would only be that that the brother who has actually gone, since he is traveling at the speed of light or near to the speed of light in his spaceship, he would be younger and not me, because I am just standing still. So there is sort of no paradox. And then, and if I have messed up the explanation, don't worry, I will write in details in the comment section also. And then there is a question is like how we came up with a theory of space-time as a two-dimension fabric. So maybe I messed it up over here. I will just try to explain it. Okay, Sir Minkowski. Yeah, so here, first of all, I am just representing only all the spatial directions like x, y, and z on this axis. So I should have written space over here and not just x. So you have to imagine that all the direction, all the possible paths which I can take in x, y, and z, I can plot it over here. So this is not actually two dimension, because here what the idea is that there are all the three dimensions, the three spatial dimensions. So this is represented by this axis over here, and time in this axis over here. So it's actually a four-dimensional space-time kind of thing. So here also, I mean, I have just written in x because I have considered the motion in just in x direction, because you would have x, y, and z, right? So it would be 3 plus 1 dimension, so that would be 4 dimensions. Okay, I will refresh again and wait for more questions. So yeah, Yogesh had asked like how we came up with the theory of space-time as two-dimension fabric. So I think I might have answered that. So regarding Rajesh about the twin paradox, I will reply to you in detail because I think I might have messed up my answer. Sandeep, how to measure the speed of light is good, but I think you had only asked like how do we measure it in only one direction. So that is a bit tricky. So I'll answer that later. I'll see if there is any other question. Okay, so I think it's almost 1 hour, but in anyways, if you feel like if I have not explained anything correctly, or if there is something you want to know more, because there are like pretty big things, not big things like, but major things which I have sort of skipped. But if you have any question, just and if I have not answered right now when I was answering, so just write in the comment section, and I will like personally answer you like in detail with like proper terminologies. And also, if you want to understand like what happens when space-time is bending about gravity, then you can check out this talk also. So stay tuned for our events. We would have like different topics like. Last time it was Emily talking about how you can do citizen science, and then you had Unni talking about asteroids and meteors. So that was also interesting. So I think there would be like good talks lined up for you. And in future we would have like, I hope so, offline events. So generally we have this tour of our observatory where people come, and if we are lucky and there are no dark clouds or no clouds at all, we see something, and then we have a lecture. But if we are having online events, then we will be sure to engage you in these concepts of physics. And is there any other question? Okay, Unni is saying yes, so I will refresh again and see. Okay. Is it, so Sandeep had asked that, is it mandatory that the returning of light beam will take the same time to reach back? I mean, yes, if there is no ether, then yes, it has to take the same time, right? Okay, I'll just have a final look. So obviously, those who were late or something can watch this talk again. And if you have any question, just write in this chat, and I will get to it. So I think I still have to answer Sandeep, and there was one more question of twin paradox in more details. So I hope whatever I had explained made like at least little bit of sense. And but anyways, I will now end my talk and go back to answering questions in chat like in proper in more detail. So thank you. Hope you have enjoyed, and stay tuned for our next Night Under the Stars event. So I will just stop the broadcast.